You remember the slide, a bit of a busy one regarding insulin resistance and all that pressure the body is putting on the liver. Well, surprise, surprise, what you really need to be doing is reducing the amount of table sugar, added sugar, natural sugar, reducing that down, alcohol if you can, added sugar, and the starchy carbohydrates. And then gradually over time, hopefully your liver will start to become less fatty and less insulin resistant, and consequently your blood sugar levels should come down nicely. In addition to that, we would hope that the amount of organ fat, visceral fat, that has developed as a consequence of this will also disappear. Onto dietary modification. We're just going to skim over the basics here, but because we have a number of other video modules, we've got a website, a Freshwell low carb website, we've got the Freshwell app and meal planners, which you can go into this in a lot more detail. But so we're going to cover the basics, and we're going to start with processed food. If you can avoid processed food as much as possible, then that's a good start. It's not just junk food that you might get from a fast food outlet, but it's things like ready meals, things in jars, things in packets, things with long lists of ingredients, many of which you may not have heard of. If it's not food as nature intended, have a think as to whether it's processed food, and try to avoid those aisles, of which there are many in the supermarket. Probably no surprise that I'm going to suggest that cutting down table sugar, and table sugar that's added to things like cakes and biscuits and processed food, really needs to be kept to a minimum. Don't forget that supposedly natural sugars from honey and some fruits can also be quite high in sugar. Generally speaking, berries are okay, but things like fruit juices really contain quite a lot of fructose, and that can cause a lot of problems and strain on your liver. So we encourage people to reduce their sugar, and if they're going to have fruit, make sure that they are the less sugary varieties. Snacking has become a part of modern culture. The food industry seems to have managed to convince us that this is the way we should eat. Realistically, this never used to happen in our past, and it's only really quite a recent thing. You don't need to snack between meals. We can really survive quite comfortably between meals, so try to avoid snacks, whether they're supposedly healthy or not. And what you should eat, and we would encourage you to eat real food as nature intended. Lots of above ground non-starchy vegetables, and meat, fish, cheese, eggs, nuts. Some people are surprised to hear that we are okay with people eating food which contains fat. It's our experience that this does not push people's cholesterol up. If anything, because it's helping them improve their insulin resistance, it tends to bring their cholesterol down. We've seen it on so many blood tests before, and we think that this is definitely a way to go, eating food that contains lots of protein and lots of above ground non-starchy vegetables. Try to keep your intake of starchy carbohydrates to a minimum. As we discussed earlier on, the starch molecules are basically long chains of glucose molecules which all get broken down in the gut and absorbed by the gut, and by the time they get to the liver, it's just a lot of glucose sugar molecules that can serve to help overwhelm the liver and cause the problems that we discussed earlier. So things like rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, cereal, that kind of thing, we're not saying don't eat them ever, but if you can really reduce the amount of these that you take, the less you eat, the better. Although you do obviously need to find a way of eating that is sustainable. Once you've been diagnosed with prediabetes, it's well worth having some annual checks. It's recommended that people have the yearly HbA1c blood test to make sure that this hasn't this hasn't progressed to type 2 diabetes. Also, worth keeping an eye on your cholesterol and blood pressure, which can both be raised with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. Obviously, the weight as well, and waist circumference, which, as we discussed, is a really good way of monitoring things. We've done some extensive modules we've got a video module on knowing your numbers, and we've also got an app which you can download here using this QR code. You can or type Freshwell into your App Store or Google Play, and you can download our app, which goes through this in much more details, what the numbers mean in a little bit more detail. So please do have a look at the Freshwell Low Carb website. From there's a link to go to the app, and you'll see a picture of the landing page on the app on the left side. And also Dr. Andrews has written some extensive recipe planners in case you're stuck and you need to have some inspiration as to how you can make these changes. If you want to dive into a little bit more detail, we've got more detail, as I mentioned, on our Freshwell Low Carb website. Another GP has written an excellent pre-diabetes guide, which goes into quite a lot more detail than we do. And the best website in the world for low carb advice and information, we think, is the Diet Doctor website. And there is so much information there if you really want to dive deep. Another GP-led website is the New Forest PCN low carb website, and they've got a great section on pre-diabetes there. Diabetes.co.uk is an excellent resource for finding information about pre-diabetes. The Public Health Collaboration website has got loads of information there too. Also, in association with our local GPs in the Colne Valley Primary Care Network, anyone who lives in those GP catchment areas can sign up for our low carb program, where they can access the video but also have some great one-to-one coaching support. And they can contact the team on the email address shown there, or you can have a look at the Colne Valley PCN low carb website. So do remember, this is a diagnosis of prediabetes is a window of opportunity to get in there and do all the life changes necessary to be able to reverse the prediabetes and hopefully never develop type 2 diabetes. Hope this helps. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.